Welcome to Newshour. Tonight we begin with breaking developments in the Middle East. Israel has confirmed it carried out a series of precision airstrikes inside Iran, marking one of the most direct and expansive military operations between the two states in recent memory. The Israeli government says the strikes targeted sites linked to Iran's ballistic missile program, as well as facilities suspected of aiding regional proxy groups. In a televised statement, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described the action as necessary and proportionate, warning that any further threats would be met with overwhelming force. Well, Tehran has condemned the attack as a violation of its sovereignty and vowed retaliation. Military units across the country have been placed on high alert, while state media reported that senior commanders have convened an emergency session. In Washington, the Trump administration has publicly backed Israel's right to defend itself, but has also called for strategic patience to prevent wider escalation. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll hear from our correspondents in Tel Aviv and Tehran, and then turn to Washington, D.C. for deeper analysis on the implications for US foreign policy and regional stability. First, let's take a look at what happened early Friday morning and how the international community has reacted.
Israel has launched a large-scale military operation against Iran, striking nuclear and military targets. Explosions were reported across Iran early Friday morning, just after 4 o'clock local time. According to the Iranian state media, the headquarters of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Tehran was also hit. Revolutionary Guard Commander Hossein Salami was reportedly killed in the strike, marking the most senior Iranian official killed so far. Additionally, 3 top Iranian nuclear scientists, including former Atomic Energy Organization head Fareydun Abbasi, were also said to be among the dead. In a recorded statement, Prime Minister Netanyahu defended the strikes, calling them essential to eliminate what he described as a clear and present danger to Israel's survival.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. For decades, the tyrants of Tehran have brazenly, openly called for Israel's destruction. They've backed up their genocidal rhetoric with a program to develop nuclear weapons.
The Israeli military confirmed it carried out dozens of coordinated strikes, targeting Iran's uranium enrichment plant at Natanz, ballistic missile factories and Revolutionary Guard sites. Witnesses described blasts rocking the capital Tehran, with air defense systems engaging Israeli missiles over the city. Strikes also damaged residential areas. Iranian outlets say children were among the casualties. The Israeli military says this is the beginning of a prolonged operation, and that strikes will continue for as many days as it takes.
The IDF has prepared for this operation over a long period and is fully capable both in defense and offense. The Chief of Staff is currently commanding the operation and conducting ongoing assessments with commanders both at the front and on the home front. The IDF is ready to continue as needed. The Iranian regime seeks the destruction of the State of Israel. This is an act of necessity in the face of an emerging existential threat.
Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, condemned the assault, calling it a display of Israel's vile nature, and warned that Israel had prepared a bitter fate for itself. A spokesperson for Iran's armed forces said both Israel and the United States would pay a heavy price. Washington has denied any involvement. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the United States was not consulted and emphasized that their top priority now is to protect American personnel in the region. The International Atomic Energy Agency later verified a strike on the Natanz facility and says it's monitoring radiation levels in contact with both Iranian authorities and its inspectors. Israel, anticipating retaliation, has declared a state of emergency. Flights were grounded at Tehran's main airport, while Tel Aviv-bound flights were diverted elsewhere.
The US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, posted on X, "Tonight, Israel took unilateral action against Iran. We are not involved in strikes against Iran, and our top priority is protecting American forces in the region. Let me be clear, Iran should not target US interests or personnel." The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the military escalation by Israel in the Middle East. In a statement through his spokesperson, Guterres said that he was concerned by Israel's actions while talks between Iran and the United States were underway, and asked both sides to show restraint. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer also released a statement urging stability in the region. He said the reports of these strikes were concerning and that the UK urges all parties to step back and reduce tensions urgently. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia strongly condemned what it called Israeli aggressions against Iran and called it a clear violation of international law. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Azerbaijan said they were deeply concerned by the military operation carried out by Israel against Iran. They condemned the escalation of the situation and urged both countries to resolve their differences through dialogue and diplomatic means. And in Armenia, the Foreign Ministry said it was deeply concerning, especially given it was taking place ahead of the next round of negotiations. On a post on X, they added, "We condemn such action and call for an immediate cessation of hostilities." Oman, who is mediating Iran and US nuclear talks, say that they consider this a dangerous, reckless escalation, that it represents a flagrant violation of United Nations Charter, the principles of international law, and that such aggressive and persistent behavior is unacceptable. They add that the Sultanate of Oman holds Israel responsible for this escalation. New Zealand's Prime Minister also reacted to the news.
It's a really unwelcome development in the Middle East. The risk of miscalculation is high. That region does not need any more military action and risk associated with that.
And Australia urged caution during this time.
Australia is alarmed by the escalation between Israel and Iran. This risks further destabilising a region that is already volatile. We call on all parties to refrain from actions and rhetoric that would further exacerbate tensions.
Pakistani Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar posted on X saying he strongly condemned the unjustified Israeli attacks on the Islamic Republic of Iran. He called it a brazen violation of Iran's sovereignty. Pakistan stands in solidarity with the government and people of Iran, he said.
OK, let's now head to Tel Aviv and speak with our correspondent there, Trent Murray. Trent, good to see you. What's the mood in the Israeli security establishment following these strikes? And how is the public reacting to this very worrying threat of retaliation?
Well, we are gathering further details about the size and scale of this major Israeli military operation. The IDF is saying over 200 fighter aircraft penetrated Iranian airspace at just after 3 a.m. local time, launching hundreds of airstrikes across the country. They've reportedly targeted senior members of the Iranian military, leaders of the powerful Revolutionary Guard, nuclear research scientists, as well as military bases, and of course Iran's nuclear enrichment sites. The scale of this, according to Iranian state media, is huge, and the Israelis are saying that they continue to gain air supremacy in Iranian airspace by taking out a number of air defense systems. Of course, while they are calling it a success, their operation, what they are also saying is that they're very cautious about what the reaction will be. Certainly Tehran is signalling that there is going to be a significant response. Earlier in the day, we saw 100 drones fired towards Israel. The IDF says they were able to intercept all of them before they reached Israel. But the bigger concern is the possibility of Tehran once again using ballistic missiles. There is only around 10 minutes notice from launch before those missiles will reach Israel, which is why a state of emergency does remain in place here. The Israeli government is telling people to keep up to date with the latest warnings. We have seen some signs, though, of that preparation. Earlier in the day, there were long lines at a number of supermarkets with people stocking up on things like bottled water and batteries, candles. We also know that public shelters have been opened, including a number of underground light rail stations. And at Ben Gurion International Airport, of course, Israel's main international airport, we are being told that almost all of the Israeli airlines have evacuated their aircraft to places like Cyprus and Greece in order to get them out of harm's way. amid concerns that a major Iranian response to this operation could be imminent. Trent Murray for Anewz, Tel Aviv.
Trent, thank you very much indeed. Now let's head over to Tehran and speak with our correspondent there, Touraj Shirililo. Touraj, what message is Iran trying to send with its response so far? And are there signs that it may escalate further in the coming days?
Yes, Guy. So far, there has been no report of Iran's retaliation, which can mean Tehran is calculating its response. Iranian leadership has vowed imminent and crushing retaliation, and Foreign Ministry, in a letter to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, has called for the emergency meeting of UN Security Council. The Foreign Ministry also said that retaliation is Iran's legitimate right, citing Article 51 of the UN Charter. Since April 2024, Iran and Israel have openly and repeatedly attacked each other, which is a broken taboo now. Israel basically did it through using air power, and Iran did it through its missile and drone facilities. This time, of course, Iran says that because of the leaked intelligence, it may hit some new secret positions inside Israel. By the way, both Tehran and Israel have the capability, the might, and the incentive to do this pattern, to repeat this pattern again and again. As there were signs of a gathering storm in the region, there are now also signs of an intensified tension in the region. If the UN and world powers do not intervene to curb this tension, this time around, Iran has double intentions to retaliate. Last times, for attacking its nuclear centers, Iran had the large barrage of missiles attacking Israel, but now today's attacks, it not only its military centers, nuclear sites were attacked, but also its top-ranking generals were killed, and also nuclear scientists. So my assumption is that there will be heightened tension in the coming days and weeks in the region.
Touraj, thank you very much indeed for joining us there from Tehran. Okay, to Washington, D.C. now, and let's speak to our analyst there, Ube Shahbanda. Ube, very good indeed to see you. I want to start with talking about President Trump's social media. It's a controversial area, but we heard, didn't we, very clear statements from the administration that there was no involvement, that they were not aware of what was about to happen. And then I've got the text here. Relatively recently, we've had this from President Trump. Very strong. It says, "I gave Iran chance after chance to make a deal. I told them in the strongest of words to just do it. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. I told them it will be much worse than anything they know or were told. We've got the most lethal military equipment in the world by far, and Israel has a lot of it, with much more to come. Certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They are all dead, and it will only get worse." I mean, we all know that President Trump has a certain charisma, there's a certain style to his diplomacy, but surely, isn't it difficult for other actors to trust the president when things are said that clearly appear to be not quite the case only moments after?
Well, President Trump, in the immediate aftermath of Israel's devastating strikes that have wiped out most of Iran's top echelon military commanders and a significant portion of their strategic missile command, the American president saying that he gave Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, a chance time and time again, giving him a 60-day deadline since that letter that President Trump sent to the supreme leader of Iran. And 61 days, one day after the deadline, we saw the Israeli Air Force and Israel's intelligence operatives, Mossad, that penetrated deep behind enemy lines in Iran, launching waves of attacks across multiple military facilities and striking the Natanz nuclear enrichment complex site. Now, President Trump here is saying that he is essentially endorsing Israel's strike, and Bibi Netanyahu, in a recorded message that he released following the strikes, also sent a message thanking President Trump and the American people, saying that these strikes against Iran's ballistic missile program and its nuclear enrichment sites are meant to not only keep Israel safe, but also the Western world. Now, when President Trump said that, hey,
Ube, sorry to cut across you there. Just very quick. So there's whatever you think, whatever your view is, there is a coherence about that. But was it the case that Mr. Trump and Mr. Rubio didn't talk to each other, that Mr. Rubio didn't get the memo that the president got, and so when he said absolutely no involvement, that he was being sincere, or did something else happen?
So the official position of the U.S. government, given Secretary of State Rubio's statement, is that the U.S. military assets are not currently involved in the strikes by the Israeli Air Force and the Israeli intelligence operatives against Iran's nuclear and missile programs. That could potentially change. We are seeing reports that Israel's planning on multiple days, if not at least 2 weeks, of strikes against Iran's underground nuclear and missile programs. And we are seeing reports that the Israelis are trying to convince the Americans to join those strikes. So far, the American president and the Secretary of State saying that the U.S. is not involved militarily in these strikes. But we saw a recent statement by President Trump that he just gave to American media saying that he was aware of the planning of these strikes. In fact, around 24 hours prior to these strikes, President Trump had warned that if Iran did not take the deal, that the Israelis could take military action. And that took place on Thursday as the International Atomic Energy Agency issued a condemnation, a rare rebuke of Iran, saying that they are not being fully compliant in providing transparency and access to international inspectors to undeclared underground nuclear sites. So on one side, President Trump is saying that he was aware of Bibi Netanyahu's intentions to strike, but American military assets, to include refueling aircraft and U.S. warplanes, are not involved in the current, at least in the first wave of Israeli strikes. That being said, that does not necessarily mean that American intelligence support was not being provided behind closed scenes. And we're seeing new reports in Washington that while President Trump had initially been reported in his phone call on Monday with Bibi Netanyahu, telling him to wait, to hold off on the strikes, to let Steve Witkoff, the special envoy of the president, to continue the negotiations with Iran, which were scheduled on Sunday, just a few days from now. And now there are now new reports that suggest that President Trump was briefed by Bibi Netanyahu on Monday on the attack plans that the American president fully knew. And we're seeing perhaps an indication of this in President Trump's social media statement, telling the Iranians that Israel has much of the military lethal equipment that the United States have, and that they must take the deal that's being offered or face destruction. And Bibi Netanyahu earlier saying that in a message to the Iranian people that this current strike is not meant to attack the Iranian people, but the Iranian regime. And so certainly militarily, it's incredibly destructive and more than likely going to lead to a certain amount of confusion and chaos within the top echelons of the Iranian military command, including their aerospace command, and which saw Ali Hajizadeh being eliminated. That's their top commander. On the American side here, seeing full support for Israel's massive strikes against Iran's nuclear program and missile programs. And we are seeing initial reports that the Natanz site which is one of 2 nuclear enrichment sites, has been struck. We can expect more American support for Israel's attack on Iran. Of course, President Trump in his social media post leaving some room for negotiations, saying that talks can still continue to happen and that Iran can salvage its position and stop the destruction. But clearly, at the moment, it seems that the military option has been chosen, and it's unlikely that the Iranians will get back to the negotiating.
So full support, as you say, officially, but behind the scenes, you know Washington, you can take the temperature of what's going on there. Is there any nervousness? Are there any cracks starting to appear as a result of this action by Israel? Because we hear a lot from supporters of Israel about their right to defend themselves. Very clear, unequivocal right to defend themselves. But many critics are asking now, does Iran also have the same right to defend itself?
Well, the concern here in Washington is that American diplomatic assets and military bases across the Arabian Gulf and the Middle East can face Iranian military retaliation. A day before the Israeli strikes, we saw a number of American embassies throughout the Arabian Gulf and the Middle East issue evacuation orders for non-essential military personnel. Another indicator that Washington fully well knew and apprised of Bibi Netanyahu's decision to essentially wipe out most of Iran's air defenses and to strike deep into Iran's nuclear enrichment sites. And of course, you have a massive American airbase in Doha, in Abu Dhabi, in Riyadh, in Kuwait City. You have a massive American embassy that is essentially a fortress in Baghdad and in Erbil, and throughout the region, all within striking distance of Iranian medium-range and long-range ballistic missiles, as well as some of their regional militia proxies. That is a big concern here in Washington.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that because, if this operation does lead to full-scale regional war, and of course everybody hopes that doesn't happen. If it does, do you not think there's an argument that the Trump administration may face questions about whether they may have encouraged escalation?
Well, it seems here with President Trump's, his messaging has been that, hey, a peace is possible. In that letter to Ayatollah Khamenei, Trump said that, hey, he wants to see Iran thrive. He wants an economic relationship, normalized diplomatic relations with Iran based on one condition only, no nuclear weapon. And it seems that President Trump has been convinced by the Israeli intelligence that believe that the Iranians are accelerating their uranium enrichment program and taking new novel steps that they haven't taken before to weaponize that highly enriched uranium that could then be quickly turned, in the words of the Israeli Prime Minister, into a nuclear weapon. So far, no American military lives or civilian lives have been lost. No diplomatic assets or buildings have been struck by the Iranians, and it's certainly there's a question on how long it will take for the Iranians to retaliate and where they will retaliate. And that is, of course, a big concern for political leadership and military command here in Washington. But they seem to have, given that they have had a heads up from the Israelis, there has been certain steps taken by American Central Command, or CENTCOM, which is based in the Middle East, to prepare for the inevitable Iranian retaliation. President Trump saying that, hey, peace can still be possible, but it's very clear here that Steve Witkoff, as the Middle East special envoy for President Trump, that any of those continued talks that he had been taking place with his counterparts in Iran, those are not likely to really move forward anytime soon, given that the widespread nature of these strikes and the fact that these Israeli strikes are also targeting some of Ali Khamenei's most closest and trusted advisors.
Ube, how do we move beyond this then? How do we influence, how does the global community effectively influence both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu? Who do they listen to? Because we've had condemnation from the EU, that's proven to be ineffective. There's been condemnation from the UN. Who are they listening to? Because there are other regional actors here that could be very important. Turkey is a very important regional actor. We also know, obviously, China is important. The Gulf states, there's some strong relationships there. Who do you think President Trump may take counsel from?
Look, that's a very good question. I mean, interestingly enough, we've seen some strong condemnation from America's closest Arab allies condemning the Israeli strikes. But it was also very interesting that in his recorded message earlier that Bibi Netanyahu said that these strikes against Iran's missile facilities and nuclear facilities are also meant to protect moderate Arab states, some of whom have diplomatic relations with Israel following the Abraham Accords. And of course, Israel wanting eventually to normalize diplomatic relations with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And we have seen in the past, such as 2019, Iran and its proxies launching kamikaze drone attacks on Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi, striking oil facilities, oil storage facilities. So there is a real fear in the capitals of the Arabian Gulf that Iran may activate its proxy forces or its drone forces to strike against their countries and to not only retaliate against Israel, because we have seen statements by Iran in the past saying that any strikes against its strategic nuclear and missile forces will also lead to attacks against any Arab country in the region that supports or facilitates Israel's attacks against Iran's nuclear and strategic missile program. But when it comes to the EU, let's not forget that most of the EU countries sitting on the board of the International Atomic Energy Agency supported the condemnation of that agency on Thursday, condemning Iran for not providing sufficient clarity on its undeclared nuclear research and development sites. And that seems to have also provided a diplomatic cover for the decision by the Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu to launch the widest and deadliest Israeli strikes on Iranian soil to date.
Okay, well, it continues to be an incredibly serious, incredibly complex situation. We'll stay monitoring things very closely. I know you'll be with us every step of the way. Ube Sharbanda, thank you as always for joining us. Well, that does bring us to the end of this edition of Newshour. As the fallout from Israel's strikes on Iran continues to ripple across the region and around the globe, we'll be tracking every diplomatic move, military development and response from world capitals. From all of us here at Anewz, thanks for being with us.